People buy emotionally, they justify it intellectually. They buy emotions, not your stuff. Hey, I'm Donnie Bovine, CEO of the Success Champions family of companies, and this is Growth Mode, where we talk about sales and business development for business owners and salespeople. Hanging out with me, as always, my buddy Kevin Snow, the sales and automation tactician and genius. Watch as we dive into how to get people to buy on emotions and quit selling your stuff. All right, this is the fun one. And this was a great lesson I learned a few years back. Because when I first really got into big boy sales, selling commercial printing, I was notorious for having that binder. We've talked about it on other episodes, right? Where you walk in, you have all your stuff, and you're getting ready to do all this, badass presentation in your mind, and then you sit across from somebody and you start going through the presentation, and they completely tune out, and they just don't want to be there because that entire movement is 100% intellectual in nature versus going in and making real connections to people. So that's what we're going to dive into specifically is how do you get to an emotional level conversation. And Kevin, I'm seriously curious for you with such a technical sales background. This doesn't come naturally for you to be able to get to an emotional side of sales. So how do you go from such a high level tech, and I'm not busting your chops, but a geek style of selling to a more emotional state of selling?
Well, I think the importance is understand what is generating that emotion and that feeling, and that's generated by the outcome or the effect that your product or service is going to provide. It's making their life easier, or it's something that's generating that feeling and that emotion that makes them say yes. And in the tech world, that's equally as important as all the stuff, as all the features. And there's always been that dual sales cycle. So you have where you're selling the CEO, the COO, the decision makers, the business people in the organization, and you're really working the feelings for them, and it's the emotions of impact for the business and outcomes and all that stuff wrapped around how we're able to provide that. But then you also have the technical sale that's going on at the same time, where you're working with their IT department or whoever is in charge of the tech piece and helping them understand all the features and the integrations and how things work together. But there's also an emotional part for that, because they're evaluating on, is this going to make my life harder? The first thing when a CEO comes to your IT and says, hey, we want you to look at there's a system, they're like, oh, fuck, another thing I have to support.
You're right.
And they're immediately in that position of, Christ, the goddamn business people are making my life harder. So there is that emotional sale on that side too. And it's not just coordinating how you do an install and how you make all the pieces work correctly. It's selling to them that, hey, this is not going to make your life harder. It's actually going to make it easier. Here are the outcomes you're going to see as the IT person. Because if they go back to the CEO and say, yeah, this is just too hard, it's going to take too much time, I'm against it, the CEO is going to say no. So
Sure.
Everyone thinks technology sales is just going in and selling stuff and rattling off all these features and, statistics and numbers and big words in it, but it's not. You still have to find that emotional trigger for your buyer. And in a lot of cases, you have to find it for multiple buyers.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for the record, I was absolutely busting your chops. I've been
I know.
waiting to say that the entire time you were talking. But but you're absolutely spot on. I think another way to look at this is when you are just selling your stuff, you're staying in the tech, you're staying in, whatever product or service you're selling, it has to stay intellectual in nature. It's because you're trying to convince them to buy. And if you convince people to buy, you're going to stay intellectual, right? But if you come in and let them self qualify, let them come to you, and you stay in the perspective of how do I disqualify this individual from working for me, you'll stay on a more of emotional side of things. You know, Kevin and I have found ourselves in a couple of sales calls where people are trying to sell us, and they stay in the intellectual side of things. And Kevin will see it. I'll send him a message, and I'm like, yeah, I'm out, right? Because they obviously don't give a shit about our brand, our business, or what we're doing. They just want to sell their shit. And as somebody who buys shit, we can feel it when this is just a transaction
Yep.
versus a relationship that wants to be formed and lifelong. I only want to work with people that are going to put in the fucking time and effort to apply the things Kevin and I are teaching on a regular basis.
So Kirby Vacuums. I don't
Yep.
know if you've ever sat through one of their sales presentations
Fuck
or not.
no.
So I used to sell them
that,
in
that
college.
explains a lot.
In college, I was a Kirby salesman. I was even a Kirby, an area manager for a bit, supporting a bunch of sales reps. But they actually, while their sales pitch is has some sleazy feelings to it because of how they do the closings and everything, their whole sales process though is really tied around that whole emotional thing for the homeowner that you're sitting in front of. It's all about churning up these feelings like, oh my gosh, my house is a pigsty. Oh my God, I can't believe how messy, how much dirt is in my carpet. My children are crawling on this. And it's all about tugging on different emotional cues for that person, whether it be, I want a cleaner house for my kids. Oh my God, this dog hair that's in my carpet and my chair is gross. I didn't know this is all here. But they're all about that. And they've built it in, and it's not, you're not like just poking and beating them over the head with it. You're doing things in their sales site, in the sales process, that brings it out naturally so that you can, for them, manipulate it at the end. So,
Hmm.
it was really interesting. I was just thinking about all the stuff I sold. I'm like, oh wow, Kirby was a huge emotional sales thing. And at the time, I never realized it.
Yeah, and I love that analogy. I think what most people need to look at, and you said it earlier, is you need to figure out specifically is what's the outcome of what you sell. What do they really get for doing this? Because I think too often people spend too much time on the front side and say, "Let me tell you what it can do," versus let me tell you what problem it's going to solve. Let me tell you, how this is going to make your life better. Or better way of putting it, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, can you tell me specifically how this is going to make your life better? How's this going to improve, your situations? Go to the Kirby Vacuums, which I've never sold, never sat through a presentation. Wouldn't let them in my fucking house. Um, uh, the whole idea of looking at them and saying, hey, how would this vacuum improve your life? It's a brilliant question to where you're no longer coming across like a sales jackass. You're letting them walk you through how your products and service will work, and this works in any industry, as you're having these conversations, because you're not trying to force a sale. I really want people to sit across from somebody and, have the thought process of, do I really want to work with that prospect? Do I really want the time and energy to invest into them to do business? Do I want to spend the next 4 to 5 years working with this individual? And if they go in with that mindset, you'll stay more on the emotional side of things because you have to connect to completely understand that process. And if you're not willing to dive in, only thing you've got to fall back on is, well, let me tell you how our features
Yeah.
and benefits is better than this other shit down the road.
For me, I had the huge realization about this when I was at Nextel and I was selling the walkie-talkie phones. And that was right when all the cellular world was starting to get commoditized, and it was becoming
Mm.
much more about, hey, I can save you $5 a month per phone. Gross. That's that. I can't do that kind of selling. But I realized, because we had some really cool features, not only like the walkie-talkie, but the data capabilities, and we had some business class apps that actually allowed people to manage their crews and their jobs and their company right from their phone, and do some really cool things with it, with GPS tracking. And so I started leading with that and really diving into the business operations side for the clients when I was going through the sales process. Instead of just focusing on how many phones do you have, where do you use them, how many minutes do you use, ooh, I can save you $5 next month. We should switch. Here's free phones. I would lead with the idea of, hey, what happens if all your crews, all your drivers can do one extra delivery a day? What kind of revenue does that generate? What happens if you are able to shorten the drive time between jobs for your drivers? If you could get rid of 10 miles a day per driver, what does that save in expenses? And we started building a business case for spending more money. So instead of now $50 a month per phone, I had them paying $150 per phone, but they were making thousands and thousands of dollars because we had an impact on how they ran their business. And that was a big realization and the eye opener for me. It's like, oh, all right, so screw the features. We're going to focus on this and then come back and show, hey, all right, so here's what we can do that can do all this stuff for you, and building it into their specific emotional needs.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. It's the idea of the person you're talking to really selling you, on what's going to make this work. And I think if more people are looking at it from the perspective of how is this a win for my clients? How is this a win for them? How do they find success after utilizing your program service? It makes everything. I mean, that's a massive cool upsell when you're helping them do business better, through what you're doing. And I think, unfortunately, most people just want to sell their shit. They
Yep.
really don't give a damn about the person they're talking to. They're just trying to cash a commission check. And whoever came up with the phrase commission breath, I fucking love, because it's a great phrase to describe how most people come off in sales.
Yep.
So, you know, um, there's an extreme on this that I want to make sure people don't do. There's some sales training out there that tells you to sell to the pain. They have, and what I don't want people to do is crack people over the fucking head to they get to the point of, oh my God, if you don't do this, you're gonna die. And that's basically how some sales training organizations out there teach how you should sell. It's not what I'm talking about doing. I'm talking about going in and really understanding the impact, like helping them understand the impact of what your products and services could do for them. So go ahead, you had some of that.
No, I was just gonna say that's really important. And for me, it was always, I never told them the impact. For me, it was always, all right, awesome. What does it mean to you if this happens?
Yeah.
What does it mean for the company if you're able to do one additional job per crew a day? Well, it means, we're going to generate X amount of more revenue, and we can do this, and we have some goals that we're trying to accomplish. Sweet, they're now giving you all that info, and it's
For sure.
not you making it up and you thinking what the impact is. It's actually a real impact, and it's making it real in their brains. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yep.
Don't beat your client over the head with their pain point.
And it's really simple, guys. If you feel like a salesperson, you're being a fucking salesperson. It's a really good indicator you're doing shit the right or wrong way. So, as always, guys, if you got any value out of this, do us a favor. Make sure you are subscribed and followed. If you're on YouTube, click the bell. And please share this off with one other person that you think would find value with this. Love you, mean it. See you, bye.